Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that has left the gamers behind. I am Aggelos, founder of the Dungeon Crawler Network, and we are coming to you from the Mighty Beard Tavern with my co-host, the one, the only, my co-GM over at Hands of Fate, Stormzlord. How are you, sir?
I'm doing awesome tonight, doing awesome. Looking forward to the conversation.
Really? I was dreading this conversation. Anyway, yeah. All right. Well, we'll have a fun time anyway. Also, Alpha Soul, how are you, man?
I'm doing great, and I'm also looking forward to this conversation, believe it or not.
Really? I know I was talking in our community Discord, and I'm just like, I know people are going to expect us to talk about this, but I really don't want to. So we actually decided to wait. I know we are actually recording this on the 26th of August, as I had to think about the date, but this is actually not going to come out till, I have to pull up the calendar now, I'm not even sure, the 3rd of September. Reason being is we wanted to give a little bit of time to let it simmer in instead of doing a knee-jerk reaction like pretty much everyone else did. If you didn't get from our conversation so far, what we're going to be talking about today on the podcast is, of course, the My.com and the tire fire that consumed the entire Ashes of Creation community when this announcement came out. If you were hiding under a rock, well, bad things happened. But we'll talk about it. But before we do, as we always have to at the beginning of our show, we got to give a shout out to our newest patron and Twitch supporters, Nicholas and Patrick over at patreon.com/Dungeon Crawler Network. And for the Twitch subs, we got Artemis89, Quellic, Ishabu, Faruza. There it is, Faruza. I always pronounce that wrong. Surigard and Bernie. Thank you so much supporting us. Twitch.tv/Dungeon Crawler Network. That allows us to keep the torches lit and the podcast rolling. On top of that, however, anyone who supports us over at Twitch and our Patreon will actually be able to get all of our episodes earlier than everybody else. So you can sit around in our community Discord talking about them, and only those of you in the special club will actually know what's going on. Fun times. I enjoy it. It's funny to watch. Anyway, you can also support us by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. That lets people know that we are a real podcast, that we say real words, and sometimes it matters. All right, guys. Let's just jump right on into this right off the bat. I have an email here that got sent out to all the PR guys. I think it was on the 21st of August, I think was the first one. I think. Anyway, they sent an updated one, so I kept that one. But they more or less were really excited to announce, and this was one of the big announcements they said was coming out of Gamescom, was that they were going with My.com as the publisher for EU and CIS regions. I guess it sort of makes sense because none of us knew they were going to Gamescom until this random announcement, it felt like. And to kind of put topping on the cake, they were at the My.com booth. They didn't have a booth. They were at the My.com booth. So, initial reactions right from you guys. When this was announced, what did you think?
So, when it was announced, I didn't have a positive reaction, but it wasn't completely negative, only because I heard of My.com, and the latest experience that I had with them was with Revelations Online. Okay. And, it was negative because it's an Eastern MMO. I generally don't like Eastern MMOs. I think they go a completely different direction. And I figured, if they're going to be the publisher, then, that doesn't bode well for Ashes.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Yeah, no. I hear you there. I know one thing, My.com really only has a few games under their list, actually. I'm actually going to pull that up here real quick because I was just looking at it about 3 seconds ago. But from an MMO perspective, Armored Warfare, Allods, and it looks like Skyforge and some other thing called Legend Legacy of Dragons. It's a browser-based MMO. And Revelation Online, I see. So that was something else. They do actually have a couple games on here from way long ago including a bunch of iOS and Android titles from 2013, 2014 before kind of jumping into actual PC gaming. Storms, what about you?
Honestly, I hadn't heard a whole lot of my.com. Hadn't thought about it until I started watching or listening to the Ashley Creation podcast there, and it was quite disturbing. I started to listen to it all, but we'll get into that and why it is and why it's probably still a good idea.
Okay. Yeah, see, my first reaction was, but then my immediate reaction was, I'm going to get the popcorn and head over to the Ashes of Creation Discord and see what's going on. Boy, was I not disappointed. I'm talking, it felt like the opening scene of Purge, okay? Like, it was nuts what was going on in that Discord. I know I was talking with Ziz already from his channel. If you check him out, he does some pretty awesome stuff, Ziz. And he was saying it was insane, nuts how people were just going off the wall. And quite right, like, the EU community was flabbergasted. Like, literally just at a loss for words. And then when they finally found words, it was anger that was shouted out.
Yeah, they were not happy.
Oh. This was actually probably, this makes all of my rants about how I hate the art direction look like tame and insanely supportive of the game compared to what was being said.
Oh, yeah.
But,
there was like refund talk and all sorts of talk, just based off of that.
I know I got several DMs in Discord asking if I thought, which I don't know why it came just to me, but I had fun talking about it, if I thought they had a legal base for asking for a refund. And I was like, well, from Kickstarter perspective, I don't think they actually ever said self-publishing anywhere on the Kickstarter page. I know it came out as what everyone assumes is a promise, but it wasn't something actually specifically on the Kickstarter page. Not that I could find.
The problem, one of the problems nowadays is everybody wants to sue over everything. You have to have a particular reason to sue. Just something that they sort of hinted or not hinted at is not something you can sue over.
Right. And that was my initial reaction. I'm like, listen, they never said on the Kickstarter that there would be these things. Because we have this certain level of interaction by Steven and the community, there's a little bit more that we kind of get out of him than what normal game developers would actually say. Trust me, we do other shows on AAA studios, and getting information out of them is almost impossible unless it's a pre-done press release. Yeah, we might see it a little early, but we still only ever get the highly curated press release, and that's all.
Yeah, and this is actually why they don't do anything except for that highly curated press release. Because, I'm thinking back, they never said that they were going to self-publish in Europe. He said that he would like to, I believe, at one point. But, the reality is, Alpha 1 wasn't even finished. You could never make that claim until you start going through negotiations, realizing what your requirements are. So, I don't think he ever made that claim.
Yeah. I'm gonna say something here, and everyone knows I like Steven. I like him a lot. And he's a pretty awesome guy, so I know he listens to this, so hopefully he'll not hate me forever. But I honestly just think it was an ignorant call. And ignorance isn't something that's necessarily negative, it just means an uninformed call. He's like, I want to self-publish. I've made calls like that, even in my own job, of I want to do something, and then when the reality of legal terms and contracts come into play, my plans have to change. I think it was fully his intention to self-publish, but I know a big thing that kind of hit everybody, GDPR, especially in the EU, you need an entire team of lawyers just to navigate that. And I know some people are like, well, why didn't you go with, make your own studio there? It's not the same. You need people specifically trained and understanding the laws of those areas in order to publish in those areas. And I know big companies like Blizzard and Activision and stuff like, they could do it, but they also have more money than, anybody. So of course they can do that. Ubisoft has multiple. Again, they are these massive companies Where, yeah, they probably have lawyers on retainer for this. But I know I was talking with, I think it was someone in our Discord. I think it was Leaf in our Discord. Leaf, if not, I'm attributing this to you. We were talking about GDPR, and he's like, well, yeah, but it was out for years, which is true. It actually was written into law in the EU back in 2015, I think it was. But the problem was, like most laws, they don't actually have, when they're written into law, they actually have a little bit of time before they're having to be observed, which was this year, Right. So I can tell you, I didn't know anything about GDPR up until all of a sudden every single company in the world having to start updating their privacy policies. Even we had to, at DCN, had to update our privacy policies and things like that because we offer a service, not a paid service, whatever, but still we had to make sure that we had some of the GDPR stuff in place. So I can tell you, I wasn't planning on it for 3 years. It was by the way, this goes live in August, and you better have it all together.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. No, I definitely had to rewrite mine, at the last, honestly, couple days, right? So unless you're really, really aware of what's going on with a different department, it's hard to get ahead of that stuff, especially when they're in a different country. So I wouldn't be totally shocked if he wasn't surprised that showed up, and then that affected everything else he had thought he would do because he hasn't gone through this before.
Absolutely. I mean, we can say that right off the bat. The one thing we know about this, and one of the things that attracted us so much to the game itself, was that it was done by somebody who is a gamer and wanted to make something better than what's currently out there, right? Mm-hmm. So I can tell you I wouldn't have known it either. And, maybe that's something people are like, oh, you should have looked at or shouldn't have, but we'll get into that. Anyway, as the tire fire continued, for those of you who were not brave enough or smart enough to avoid the Ashes of Creation Discord, it got so bad at the height of Gamescom that Steven did two things. One thing we're going to talk about, which was he actually came in, and the brave man that he was, decided to hop into voice chat with about 300, was when I hopped in, but I think it was like over 1,000 by the time that it had ended, and decided he was going to talk about some of this. But he also invited a Volkier, I can't pronounce the last name. Anyway, he's the head of products at my.com, to both make a statement on Discord, which was then updated on this list. And I'm actually going to read both of the official statements that came from the PR side. Oh. That was weird. Everyone still there?
I'm here.
All right.
Alpha's missing, though.
That's okay. I think we're okay. Just all of a sudden, that was weird. Anyway, so he comes on and he wrote this in Discord saying, I want to share a quick message with all of you following our announcement regarding my.com and Ashes of Creation. We at my.com, this is Volkier speaking, the head of product at my.com, are fully committed to supporting the creative vision that Intrepid Studios has for Ashes of Creation. In our partnership, we are looking forward to supporting them and with the knowledge and experience of my.com in publishing areas of localization, community management, server infrastructure, and more, while Intrepid will remain full creative control of the game. My.com has primarily published traditional free-to-play titles from predominantly Eastern developers, and we are looking forward to this partnership with Intrepid exactly because they have the vision that is different from the titles we already have on our portfolio. Their vision appeals to the desires of Western MMORPG fans, and we are committed to bring this non-pay-to-win version to European players. We believe that Ashes of Creation is on its way to become one of the largest MMOs ever to be globally published, and we are excited to be part of this journey together with our friends at Intrepid Studios. Steven hopped on right afterwards and said, I would like everyone in our community to be aware, Intrepid will maintain 100% creative control over Ashes, and our partners, my.com and Mail.ru, shares our visions for Ashes, as this was very important to us. This means our stance on pay to win for the game. This partnership allows us as a studio to focus on the development of the game and allows us to feel comfortable with the level of service that we know my.com and Mail.ru can provide our glorious community. This still did not go over well.
Oh no, no, no,
No,
no, no.
and it's not going to.
No.
Based on the prevailing opinion, it's not going to go well.
And I know some people jumped the gun and were pretty much saying, yeah, they're going to make this pay to win. They're going to control the cash shop and everything of that nature. And here's actually a question for you guys. Do you think that is actually going to be something that will happen? The 100% creative control, does that include monetary control?
So it's going to depend on the cost structure and the ownership structure, right?
Yeah.
And how it's contracted. So I don't know. But if it's set up the way I think it is, with Steven maintaining at least the percentage of majority interest, he's going to control that. But I don't know what it's going to take to get it over there, to get it done, to get it, working with them. I don't know what other investors he has. So there's a whole different there. Who really gets to change that is going to be who's got majority ownership and what block is going to want to do. It's not me. I wish it was me, but it's not me.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to deal with that. Anyway, here's a question for you. How most publishing would assume to work at this point is that they would get a certain portion of the proceeds, right, that come from any kind of financial transaction from any account using the my.com servers. How do you think this is actually going to affect the referral system, giving that 15% of all?
If, again, we're assuming it's based on a transactional basis, right? Some contracts are set up on transactional, some are not. Some could be set up on a perpetual basis of large gross. Some could be set up on the amount of players. Some could be set on, this is what you get every time, period, right? And then renegotiate it as you go along. Is assume transactional. If we assume transactional, it's going to have some sort of effect on the referral.
See, I know that was kind of, at least early on, I don't want to say a selling point, because let's face it, most people probably didn't have enough people in their communities or whatever to get more than a handful of referrals. But that's kind of what it is. You refer people who are your friends, et cetera, and hopefully you would earn enough to, make up for your sub. I just bit my lip, and now it's bugging me. Ugh. Of course, right in the middle of a show. Maybe a little bit extra that you could spend on cosmetics and fun things of that nature. But I don't think they could backtrack on that. I really don't. And this is my personal thought. But that means that the cost of publishing in the EU, even less of the profit is going to come back to Intrepid Studios from anyone playing in the EU side. I guess they could write that off because they'll be handling all the customer support, the server infrastructure and stuff that they'd have to pay for themselves. So maybe in Intrepid's mind that works, because they're going to take whatever their cut is. And let's take Steam and Valve for an example. They take 30% off the top.
Right. And look what Bethesda just did for Fallout 76. They're not going to release on Steam. Right? Because they don't want to pay that 30%. So that could be how they take that and not affect the referral whatsoever. It's going to depend on how that's laid out.
I also want to say this because, again, I was dumb enough to actually hop in that Discord and read it. People were like, why didn't you just use Steam as a publisher? And Steven did make a good point that Steam does not provide any of the community management or server infrastructure at all.
Yeah.
No localization either.
That's a good point, right? I believe the way Steven has been answering the questions is a very good way to do it. There's some more PR stuff that could have been up there, but I'm sure he'll get on top of that. But what we all have to understand and back up is we aren't seeing the whole picture. They're not going to show us the whole picture, why these decisions were made. I've not seen tremendously bad decisions yet come out of Steven. I'm sure there have been some, but, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt of this when there's a reason he went with this. I don't think he expected this much of a pushback.
Yeah, I got to agree with that. I mean, I think one thing that he said that was pretty interesting was he said it actually multiple times, is that this publisher put them in the best position to release when they want to release. So it sounds like that there were discussions potentially with other publishers that couldn't make the dates and timeframes that they were talking about.
Or wouldn't let them do it.
Right.
Right, or they controlled those dates and they wouldn't let it happen. So
Yep.
it's going to depend.
Yep. Jumping into after the tires were still burning, I don't even want to say it was over at this point because they were still on fire and people were still throwing fuel on the fire. Steven decided he was going to hop out and talk from Gamescom with the community. And we're going to kind of hit on some of the transcripts. And we'll actually have a transcript of the entire thing brought to you by ashesofcreation.wiki and those guys over there who provided this for us. They painstakingly, and I do mean painstakingly, went through and actually wrote all this out. Because I listened to the audio.
It was terrible.
It was rough.
It really was.
I don't know if it was just the fact of having 1,000 people in voice chat on a single server or the fact that Steven was coming from Germany and Gamescom, which if we know anything about any of the trade shows, you don't really get signal there. Like we did an interview with Steven during PAX West, and it was rough. It was definitely rough.
Well, that, and he was using Discord on his phone, so every time he'd get a phone call, it would flip over to the phone call.
Yeah, I remember that. Oh, that was rough. That was definitely rough. But they went through and did the best of their abilities. So some of this feels like it's kind of missing because at times we just couldn't hear him. But I know one thing he mentioned was, like you said, about having the ability to launch globally. That was something. And now he said, obviously, there's a lot of publishers that exist out there. They have a lot of different games under the belt, and sometimes small games can get lost in the mix of responsibilities that a publisher might have. So we wanted to make sure that the publisher understood and recognized that Ashes of Creation will very likely be one of the largest MMORPGs to release in a very good amount of time. My.com doesn't have a whole lot in the terms of the MMO side. Do you think that might have had something to do with it?
Based on nothing.
Yeah.
I think so, because they're going to be having, they want more, they would like to get into that genre, right, to spread it out. But also, with the problems they've been having, they're going to be a little more flexible in their contracts and trying to get big names over to them.
Now, let's not be naive here, and I know some people were asking about this. During this contract, we know that Intrepid Studios got something out of the deal. Not just this. I'm sure they got some sort of monetary funding as well, a big influx of cash, because obviously they recognize how big the community is already as a pre-launch. That they're recognizing this is going to be something really big, and they wanted in on that. So we know that they probably contributed a little bit of money just towards, the development of the game in order to actually get the contract. So, all right. So let's go ahead and we're going to just jump right on into this. There was something else I wanted to say first, and I totally lost my complete track of thought. They talked about, well, we'll get to it because I know there's some questions in here. I think I know what I wanted to talk about. Anyway, I know this is a big thing for us because Hands of Fate, we're an international community. We do have people from all over the world. And one of the very first questions right off the bat is, will there be a region lock? And Steven says, so at the moment, there's obviously in discussion with regards to region lock. There's no definitive answer. It's very possible we will not be given a region lock. We have the capability of identifying players and accounts and tagging them as either European or Russian. So at the moment, the answer to your question is I don't know. But it's very possible, I would like to say, that there won't be a region lock because we can identify players as part of their region without having to IP block. So, here's where the good news comes in. Today, this is one of the reasons why we also held off on doing a show, was because we knew there was going to be some announcements coming out. And Steven came on the Discord today saying that I'm happy to announce that we have conveyed the points from the community and instituted policies and procedures to address them. My.com is drafting the new policies as we speak and will be conveying them soon, likely tomorrow or potentially Monday. So this may be in regards to some of the stuff we'll be talking about a little later, privacy, etc., etc. I cannot get on voice tonight as I'm currently about to pass out. Poor Steven. Anyway, he says Intrepid will be handling the packaging of the game client as well, so you won't have to use the my.com client to launch, which some people thought may happen. There will be no IP blocking, and I can confirm there will be no region locking. That was a big concern of ours. Now, from a contractual standpoint, knowing where someone originates, are they just going to, like, if anyone's going to be playing on the NA servers, are we still going to get my.com get their piece of that because they're an EU or Russian account? I don't know how you would tie into that, or how. My thought when I was originally scared of this was like, there's no way they're going to allow no region lock, because any EU player or Russian player playing on North American server is money that my.com is not getting. How do you think they're doing that?
They've done a different funding mechanism then. Right? Because if they're not going to count the number of players, I mean, you can obviously count that from the IP, you can get a good balance, but sometimes you're missing people, right? So there may be some sort of transactional setup based on each month how many come in from an IP that is in wherever.
What if it's done by billing? Well, I guess you couldn't really do it by billing.
It's going to depend, right? There's many ways you can set it up. That maybe where the billing address is not a bad one, right? If they're going to do a billing address, that's not bad.
My thought would be, why then, as an American publisher, would we want to pay my.com for people who may be originating from EU but playing on US? So we're essentially paying them and not utilizing their hardware?
That's going to depend, right? So if we're, again, assuming where the contract is set up, right? If you know where they're playing and you know their account, we can say, hey, look, they played on NA, but they're from somewhere else. They may have figured out some funding mechanism for, you know what, we're going to do a chargeback when that occurs. So every month they'll look back and say, let's charge those people back. Again, I don't know, but I think they've thought about it. Because that'd be money neither one would be liking, so
yeah,
there'd be something set up. And think of it this way. The company I work at has a couple subsidiaries that are different states. When they do all that tax and stuff, it depends on where the person is located, so they use the IP. They also look at where they're coming from, where they're supposed to be. So if I'm supposed to be in Detroit, but my IP is in New Jersey, there's a chargeback between Detroit subsidiary and the one over in New Jersey, because they're funding where that's coming from.
Okay, fair enough. That doesn't.
Again, we're guessing it all.
No, we are, but it's good that, like, just from even your company in general, like, that just wouldn't. It just doesn't compute with me. Why would I want to pay New Jersey if they're paying from, where I'm at now? Like, they're not using the hardware, and yet they still get a kickback for using North American server? Like,
I don't know.
That's weird.
You want to make sure, what you want to do is you want to make sure that whoever is covering the cost of the server gets a bigger cut than the one that is just hosting the account if they're not doing anything from that account. But if they're doing both in the same thing, there may not be a chargeback. So it all is going to depend how they set it up.
Gotcha. Okay. Another bit of fear here is, they were talking about maintenance and patches on EU servers, whether it's going to be touched by Intrepid or my.com. And all content is being created by Intrepid Studios with regards to maintenance, and will be implemented at the discretion and instruction by Intrepid Studios. And patch updates will follow the update schedule to the Intrepid Studios set forth. I know they were talking about if Intrepid is still talking about self-publishing in North America, and that's a yes. But when asked about Oceanic and Southeast Asian region, if they're going to be thrown into my.com, they go, so the answer to that is at the moment, we do not have a publisher in mind for Oceanic or the Southeast region of Asia. So we'll most likely self-publish in the Oceanic. But it is very possible that legal restrictions may be applied to the type of publishing, and if we can do so in the period of time that matches the simultaneous launch, we would love to. But there could potentially be a delay in that regard because of those restrictions, but we were looking into it. Is Oceanic and Southeast Asia servers going to be delayed by that? If they cannot self-publish like they want in those regions, and we know they cannot self-publish in China, that's just not going to happen. Right. Not saying they even want to go to China, but if for whatever reason they grew and wanted to go to China, they would have to have a publisher in China. China doesn't let anyone do anything in China without Chinese go-ahead. But the way I'm reading this is that if, for whatever reason, a legal hurdle happens and they cannot self-publish in the Oceanic and Southeast Asian regions, that means there are going to be no Oceanic and Southeast Asian servers at launch.
That's what it sounds like to me. That's exactly what it sounds like.
That might be some problem they have, yeah.
That's going to be interesting. Going in here further down, a lot of the concerns revolve around account theft, localization issues, and or was the other one here? Oh, Russian. Okay. Let's talk about these three things. First off, we have account thefts and localization problems. AlphaSoul, you played Revelation Online. Yeah. I was smart enough to avoid that game because I knew it was a Chinese piece of crap. No, I'm just going to put that out there. Anyway.
Yeah, there's an opinion. There you go. Right?
It's an opinion. Well, and it might have been a not first-person opinion, and it may have been because I was just assuming because it was a Chinese piece of crap that it was going to be a Chinese piece of crap. But I think everyone who played it will then agree that it was a Chinese piece of crap.
Yeah, so to be perfectly honest, I just didn't like the game. So I couldn't even give you an informed opinion because I lasted all of maybe 30 minutes on the game. I still have it, but the style to me was just all wrong. It felt like, you could purchase, X amount of stuff. The artwork was all off. It seemed to be very, there wasn't really the depth that I'm looking for in MMOs, or just kind of that separation. It seemed to be more of a video game marketplace, if you will. So I never, took a liking to it. I couldn't even tell you, any thoughts about it, to be perfectly honest.
Sure. I'll hop into this one because I know they also mentioned that a lot of issues with my.com is going into the community support, and what people are kind of worried about is this happened fairly recently, a few months after the launch of Revelation. All the top players essentially got hacked because they had database issues. So this wasn't anything really about the players not having a secure password or anything like that. It's like, oh, I use a completely hex password, 64-bit. No, it wasn't a problem because the hackers actually got into the database themselves. So all the top players of the game got their accounts hacked and lost them. And there was absolutely no customer support recourse to help them. And I've seen that quite a bit on the MMORPG Reddit. I never went on the Revelation Online Reddit because I didn't care. It was a game I didn't care about. But it did hit news there. So I know there was some concerns about that. I have also heard concerns, and I've seen YouTubers and whatnot talking about when the game was coming out, how in even alphas and betas, that the localization was absolutely terrible. Things were poorly translated, not translated at all.
That I can attest to.
Okay.
That I can actually attest to. I didn't mention it, but that even within the first 20 minutes of playing the game, you can actually see that the localization is horrible, and that was on Revelations Online. So I can attest to that part at least.
Yeah.
So that's two different points. And while we're talking about localization, do we know who did the localization for that? Well, was it my.com or was it, the owners of the game, right? So it's going to depend.
Fair. That's fair.
I don't know, right? So I would think, again, that, hopefully Intrepid has thought about the localization as getting somebody in that area to do it, not somebody in North America to translate for somewhere else.
True. And Chinese is a very complicated language as well, so it would make a lot of sense. Here's something. Has anyone ever played Skyforge? I have not. I know a few people in our community have.
I have not.
I don't remember. From what I understand, Skyforge was not bad overall. I don't want to say some of the things that drove people away were mechanic-wise stuff and monetization issues, which people are obviously concerned about. There were limits to how far you could actually advance your character each and every week unless you paid for the ability to continue to advance. Otherwise, you were hard capped, sort of like since most of us are playing WoW at this point, at least early on, it was kind of like earning Valor points in Wrath of the Lich King, and you were only given so much. Everyone was. But what if you could pay money to go higher?
Right.
That's pretty much what was happening in that one. But from a server stability, I feel like that was fairly good, but I know there are concerns about the massive data breaches that have happened in the past, as well as when people were hacked because of these data breaches, the lack of any kind of customer support in order to actually provide them with their accounts back. And speaking of, and this one just, I'm sorry, Alpha, I'll let you get to this one in a second, but it just hit my head when Storm said this. If they can tell where your stuff is coming from, even if you are an EU or Oceanic player playing on North America and something happens to your account, are you going to have to go through my.com customer service because that's what they're paying for?
No.
Well, that's going to be a question, right? I would hope not, but that may be why they're having my.com come out with new policies.
Mm-hmm.
But they may have said, you know what, that's a good call. We didn't get that one. You need to come up with a new policy that's going to show that this is going to be handled correctly if it happens again.
Sure.
And unfortunately, nowadays, everybody's hacked. It's not that if you won't be hacked. The question is, what's your policy? How do you handle it when you are hacked?
Right. And I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit on one of these, but it says, will my.com be in control of billing, finances, other forms of data that belong to players? Yes, my.com and MailRU will have billing and account information that they will... ... That's where the thing cut out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually thinking that if it could detect where you're from, all of your financial stuff is still going to go through my.com as part of their contract in order... Like, yeah, maybe they will not control what server you can play on, but just because you are geographically located in the EU, I think you're going to have to go through my.com for any customer support, because I think if you get a hold of the North American support, they'll be like, I have to redirect you. You're an EU account.
That's probably true for the account information.
Yeah.
I don't know, technical information, it's going to be that way, but account information, I believe you're correct.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just me, but I mean... The number of things that have been hacked, I'm not worried that much. Even if I was over there to worry about my.com, heck, our three credit agencies have been hacked. Well, I mean, they have more data than, Steam will ever have on me. So I'm not concerned about that one.
Fair.
But again, it didn't happen to me for that particular one. So I'm not saying it's wrong for people to care about it. I just think there's bigger hacks to be worried about than that one.
So, and this is a question which I really didn't think too much about, and I don't think there's a lot of weight, but I kind of wanted to touch on it anyway, because there was a scare, especially earlier on. Is it all right to make a publishing deal over two regions with essentially one Russian holding company that can be included into sanctions at any time? Because we know several Russian companies here in the U.S. were sanctioned. Now, that may not apply to the EU. I don't know. Did those companies also get sanctioned outside of the U.S., or was that just a U.S. one? I think it was just a U.S. when it came down to Columbus Nova.
Right.
And their
that
assets being frozen?
From our government. So they could be sanctioned by the EU, right, or the Russian government or whoever, but those particular sanctions, that section of them were from us, but other governmental agencies sanctioned them as well.
Right. I mean, technically speaking, pulling it out of, I think this is a question that's just tricky and we really can't get too much into, but if the entire world decides we're going to sanction the U.S., guess what? No Ashes of Creation for anyone outside of the U.S., period.
That's right.
Pretty much, yeah.
Because you won't get any updates because we can't send them to you.
Yep.
So, also means no Avengers movie for anyone outside the U.S. Sorry.
Well, let's say film it all in China because they're, there's a significant portion of them that you can find outside of China.
Oh, I thought that was the Warcraft movies. Anyway, moving on. So much of this, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of questions here, and I'm going to include this link, but so much of it was just rehashed over and over again. And the common theme was just why? Why?
Yeah, I don't think they were prepared for this hard of a kickback.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think, and again, this is just my perspective, right? A lot of these questions were not, I think, approached in the right manner. You're just throwing crap at the wall, right?
Sure.
Because you can do it. That doesn't mean it's a good, valid question or the right way to ask it to get a valid answer. And maybe it's just a place I can vent, so let's vent.
Mm-hmm. Let's actually jump into our mailbag because we did get one email this week from Maria. So shout out to Maria. Hello. And I thought this would be a good discussion for us to have because we kind of already talked a little bit about what we're here, but this is going to go into a little bit more of our personal feelings. It's like The View, but... Yeah. All right. Anyway, Maria says, and this is the subject of the email, EU screwed. So it's going to start off good. So let's just jump into this. I reckon you'll talk about this on your podcast coming Monday. Sorry to disappoint you, but episode 58, which comes out Monday, does not have anything to do with this. 59 will. But the announcement of my.com/mailru has totally derailed my hype for Ashes of Creation. I'd play on the North American servers, but if you remember Terra, the ping actually decreases DPS. There was a video about the speed at which arrows could be fired. You're actually from the US. I was wondering how you felt about this. I'm going to let you guys go first. So, Alpha, what about you?
You know what? Let me get second.
Okay, Storms.
All right. I'll go first, but not with my own opinion because I'm from the U.S. But Robot has been mentioning and has mentioned in the past, right, one of our guild members, that being from Australia, she doesn't like to do PvP because she's always behind by a little bit because of the ping. She likes doing trials and healing trials because she knows what's coming next, even though she can't see it happening. She's fairly certain of what's going on, so she starts to direct her healings based on where she is time-wise, but you can't do that when you're playing PvP and it's always changing. So that is a factor right now within ESO, and I think it'll be a factor in any game that has this ping that causes problems, and it's just the way it is.
You know, it's actually funny. I've never really asked her whether or not she enjoys PvP or not because of that factor. I just assumed she was more of a PvE type girl. I know we had a few people in the ESO side of things, and this maybe for the Oceanic it's a little different, but I know people who jumped over to the EU side, especially when they moved the EU servers from, I think it was Ontario to Frankfurt, actually made it an EU data center in Elder Scrolls Online, that they said their ping was worse than connecting into the US server. I think that might have got sorted out a little bit over time, but does anyone know what kind of ping rate people were getting on ESO? Like, did they ever mention that? If I seem to remember, one of our guildies and one of our GMs, Arcaneer, was mentioning he would often sit about 150, 180 connecting to the North America server.
And then there's spikes, which is really what kills you, right?
Well, I mean, they hit me too, so...
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't get that many. I don't have a gig connection, but I get a pretty good one. But definitely, when pings spike, it's a problem.
Yeah.
Alpha Soul, what about you?
Well, so I kind of had the same, stance as our guildie, basically, and that's with any you know what? Give me another 2 minutes.
Okay. All right. I'll try to go here and what do I think from the EU side of things? All right. ping actually decreasing DPS could be a real problem. I wasn't real concerned when Ashes of Creation was first announced when I was thinking about the combat system, but seeing what we talked about in episode 57, the action combat, I can really see a problem coming up with ping, with how action-oriented it appeared to be. I mean, it almost looked like a first-person shooter in some points, especially with the bows and whatnot. I cannot imagine doing that with a very high ping. I know once upon a time, I used to operate on a 250, 300 ping almost all the time, and that's because I was running on a DSL connection in the middle of nowhere. We have some DSL people in our guild as well who often deal with that anyway, and action combat really does hurt. Like, it really does, because you have to have those callbacks to the server, and if you have any kind of delay, yeah, you're going to have problems. I am concerned for a lot of our EU and Oceanic players. Some of them were going to actually, you know, like those who wanted to come and join us on the North American side anyway, were doing so more from a community aspect rather than almost a play aspect, if you will. And some of them were not necessarily all that hardcore, like you said. I shouldn't say hardcore. I should say the type of activities that they enjoyed, ping wouldn't be a huge amount of issues. Questing, some dungeon running, maybe some light raiding, crafting, gathering, that kind of stuff. That's probably not going to be a problem. If you enjoy that level of stuff, that's probably not going to be a problem. If you enjoy PvP on a mass scale, such as city sieges, I know, probably not going to be a problem. Why? Because everyone's probably going to be having the same lag issues with hundreds of people on the screen. So you'll all be in the same laggy slideshow that everyone else is. But any kind of PvP in terms of the battlegrounds or anything of that nature, yeah, it is probably going to be an issue. And I do have those concerns. I'm just hoping that their netcode is good enough that players connecting to the North American server will not have those issues. I still think, based on what we talked about a little while ago, that it's not going to really matter. You're still going to have to deal with my.com. If it's anything account related, they're going to handle all of that. I really don't think any EU people are going to get away, even while playing on North American servers, away from my.coms, at least from the account management point of view, because again, with GDPR, maybe we can't hold that data. Or we don't even want to deal with the regulations on how you have to treat European data. All of that
might be something there.
Oh, yeah. I wouldn't want to. I absolutely would not want to. There's, even on our site, European data and stuff like that, we have it checked that it doesn't retain any of it. None of it. Nothing. We don't want it because I don't want to have to be called up and saying, hey, guess what? You have this data and you're not following GDPR standards. I don't really know what they're going to do to me at that point. It's like, whatever. But anyway, from a company that actually has real financial skin in the game, yeah, they probably don't want to deal with that.
That is a choice. Same thing with when you deal with credit card numbers and that information. There's a whole different layer of security you have to have. That the company I'm in, they've mandated,
PCI.
We're not going to touch it. You do whatever you want, but we will not have that data because we will not be PCI compliant.
Yep.
And the GDPRs can be the same thing. They're gonna, no, we don't want to touch it, which may have been part of why this contract was the best one to go with. We're not going to touch that data, right? They're not for us.
Yeah,
and I've worked in PCI compliant businesses. No, it's not fun. It is not fun in the least. All right, Alpha Soul, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right.
So I wanted to actually bring it back to a story. I remember way back when I was actually playing Ultima Online, and most people actually connected via 28K modem, and then 36 came out, and then the 56 came out, and then the first people that started getting T1 lines essentially ruled PvP. Like, they were the unquestioned gods of PvP. Because you couldn't touch them, you couldn't catch them, you couldn't hang with them. if you got them low, they just zip off screen, heal, zip back, and come with the same way. And so when you start circling back on PvP specifically, and they started showing the action combat, and then the hitboxes supposedly that they're going to be coming up with, and you need that Twitch click skill, if you will. You don't stand a prayer, basically. If you're connecting at I dare say even 150, 300, you're at a significant disadvantage, rather than somebody who actually has sub 100 ping and is connecting pretty well. So it did concern me. Though the only reason why I wasn't freaked out about it is because I know they've said multiple times in the past that, hey, this is just the first pass at combat. This is what they're kind of dealing with. They're dealing with the action side first before they go over to some other aspects. So, I'm still kind of waiting to see how combat actually turns out before I start getting concerned.
I would be more concerned about the net structure between you and the server than their net code.
Yeah.
So that's the bigger problem you have. And how do you do that, right? You can't change it, but that's a bigger problem than their net code behind the scenes, in my opinion.
No, that makes complete sense. I mean, like you said early on, people with T1s in Ultima Online, you couldn't touch it. That's always going to be an issue, and that's also why in a lot of these tournaments and stuff like that, when you see tournaments like for Overwatch and things like that, like BlizzCon and stuff like that, it's all done in-house.
Oh, yeah.
To rule out any ping issues.
Mm-hmm.
And
Absolutely.
there's no way whatsoever that you're going to get away from that. Period. Because let's face it, I have 200 megs up and down. I'm probably going to have a higher response rate than our guildmate Scooter, who's on DSL. Mm-hmm. It's just going to happen. And unless there was a way for them to, and this would never be popular, but throttle everyone's connection to the exact same latency.
There you go. That'll make everybody happy.
Oh, yeah, everyone will love that. Let's just throttle everyone down to the lowest base denominator. So whoever's signing in with a 56K is getting stabbed, okay? But, yeah, no, unless you're doing that, that's always going to be an issue, even while connecting within the same data center. That's going to be an issue with someone who doesn't have a good enough video card, right? Can you imagine rendering issues? Some things that people attribute to lag are not lag. It's failure of your GPU to actually render what you're seeing.
Yeah.
So that very much is going to be something to take into effect. There's a lot of things. And I don't, I think, I quite frankly think people in the EU are, screwed one way or the other. You're going to be stuck with my.com, even while playing on North America. I would bet money on it that if you have to put in a support ticket, it's not going to be answered by North America. It will get routed automatically to my.com support center.
I think you're right.
So my advice is play where you want to. Your data is already going to be in a compromisable position. Your only way of getting away from it is not to play Ashes of Creation. Because, let's face it, you're with my.com. And I know some people are already complaining like, well, maybe if we shout loud enough, they'll change it. Let me tell you this. The way they're talking, they've already signed a contract.
Yeah, I agree.
Most contracts are 5 to 7 years. Sometimes 3, very rarely less than that.
Mm-hmm. Though that is not changing. That boat has sailed. You have to deal with it or not.
Yep.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's not popular, but frankly, there's nothing you can do at this point.
Those announcements, they're made when that ink is dry in that paper.
Yep. And I know they could do some kickback, like what they're doing now to rewrite policies, but really that's not going to change anything other than it is what it is, right? Like I don't
get better, so maybe they are actually going to try. I'm not buying it, but maybe they are.
Maybe. I feel like a lot of it's here's the thing. Here's the real thing. Those policies and procedures, other than the publicly facing policies, even if they're rewriting policies, let's say they are, okay? Let us say they are actually doing what they're saying they're going to do. We will never know because we are not allowed to see those policies. Those are internal only. Outside of privacy, which I bet you any money is exactly the same as anyone else's privacy policy because it's all dictated by GDPR and what they can actually say. It is boilerplate across the board. So we have no idea, and you can only really take their word for it. I know that probably is not what people wanted to hear, but that's the long and short of it, is you're just going to have to take the word of Intrepid Studios that they trust my.com for whatever reason. And here we are. All right, guys. Oh, go ahead.
The positive thing, though, is at least Stephen and the Intrepid crew have been extremely forthcoming in everything that they do. So, while my.com has a horrible record, customer service and everything wise, the opposite has pretty much been true for Intrepid Studios. So at least there would be that recourse to do something about it, because I highly doubt that if something did happen that Stephen and crew would just stand, pat and not do anything about it.
Fair. Yeah, that's actually a good question to have is, do you think that, more or less Intrepid would stand in if anything happened to try to make things right for what happened, right? Like, if my.com fails in whatever reason, do you think Intrepid would actually step up and take over? The thing that comes to mind is, and this goes into the company themselves, who was the company that had this issue? Oh, Good Old Games, GOG. No Man's Sky, I'm sure everyone knows that dumpster fire sucked at launch. Like, it wasn't anything. Now they've started to get a little better. And apparently there was an issue where people on GOG were buying it, but the updates weren't there. And the guys were saying, listen, we're going to be behind. It's going to be like 6 months till you guys get the updates.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it was a good number of months. And
wow.
Yeah, it sucked. GOG bit the bullet because Hello Games wouldn't touch it. They're like, sorry. You're outside our refund policies. GOG bit the bullet and gave refunds, even though Hello Games was not.
I don't wonder how you could, it's a different story, but how you could fix that. That's a huge, I don't know, that period of time, there's got to be somebody who could fix that. But that's a different story.
That's whether or not the company is what the company says, but yeah, I don't know if you could really do a whole lot for that or not. So, but the thought would be, yeah, maybe you could, maybe you couldn't. I don't know. All right, guys, I think this is going to be the end of our show tonight. So, guys, where can people find you, Alpha Soul?
Yeah, I can be found here on Discord. I can be found pretty much in the Dungeon Crawler Network channel, as well as the various channels pretty much that we have, as well as youtube.com/DRACDOC.
There you go. Stormzlord.
So you can find me at the Discord for DCN on ESO. You can find me at Twitter. You can find me working furiously on the next game we're working on at Digital Piper Studios, and working on the background of the guild site as we do other stuff back there.
Got some exciting stuff there, but we won't say anything about that yet. I just like to give teasers because I can. Anyway, you can follow me on Twitter at Aggelos, AGGELOS_DCN. And of course, if you want to join all three of us in our guild, Hands of Fate. That is our Ashes of Creation chapter of the Dungeon Crawler Network, a gaming community forged by the listeners of our podcast. We are a PvX guild based in the North American data center with players from all over the world. We have scheduled events for each region's prime time, so if you're an EU or Oceanic resident but have enjoyed playing with us in the past, are for the first time, or maybe to get away from my.com, we encourage you to join. The guild's focus is on progression, ratings, small-scale PvE, crafting, gathering, node-based PvP, aka the open world, and community growth. We are currently looking to build out some more of our PvP squads and PvE raiding teams, so if that is something that you enjoy doing, check us out. All right, guys, you can follow everything we do over at DungeonCrawlerNetwork.com. You can find links to all of our social media, including Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Be sure to check out our Patreon program at patreon.com/DungeonCrawlerNetwork. If you want to help support the show, you can also leave us a 5-star review on iTunes so people know that we are a real podcast, that we say real words, and sometimes they matter. Thank you for joining us on this episode of From the Ashes, and we will see you next time. See you later, everybody.